The vastness of space was silent and cold, with only the hum of the alien fleet's engines breaking the silence. The fleet, made up of hundreds of sleek, futuristic ships, drifted through the stars. Their mission was simple: scan the nearby sectors for any signs of danger, especially from the humans. The aliens had long known about human activity, but they never truly believed humans could pose a serious threat. That was about to change. Among the many ships in the fleet, one stood out. It was a ship with a dark weathered hull, drifting aimlessly in the black void of space. At first glance, it seemed nothing more than an abandoned vessel. Its outer structure was damaged, and there were no signs of life aboard. To the alien fleet, it appeared to be nothing more than debris, a ship that had been left behind by its creators. Yet, there was something about it, something that made their scanners hum with a strange energy. Commander Vornok stood at the helm of his ship, gazing out at the human warship through the viewing window. His sharp, green eyes scanned the vessel with suspicion. It looked ancient, its edges worn and scarred from years of battle. He had been through hundreds of routine scans before, but this one was different. He could feel it in the air. Something was off about this ship. "Prepare the scan," immediately Vornek ordered, his voice steady but with an edge of concern. His officers quickly activated the ship's scanners. A stream of data began to pour in, flooding the control room with detailed readings. At first, nothing out of the ordinary appeared on the screen. The human warship was old, its energy output minimal, and its systems seemed damaged. But Vornak wasn't convinced. The more he looked at the ship, the more unsettled he felt. It felt alive. "Commander, the scan is complete. There are no signs of life aboard. We are detecting minimal energy fluctuations," his chief officer Yeltha reported. Her voice was calm, but Vornak could tell she, too, felt uneasy. But Commander Vornak wasn't satisfied. Something wasn't right. He walked closer to the scanning station and examined the data himself. The human ship's energy levels were strange, lower than any active warship, yet there was a peculiar pattern to the fluctuations. It was almost as if the ship was waiting. "Increase the power of the scan. I want to know everything about this ship," Vornak ordered. His officers nodded and worked quickly. The scan intensified, and more information began to flood the control room. Suddenly, a sharp beep echoed through the quiet room. It was a signal that none of them expected. The energy readings spiked dramatically. "Commander, the readings, they're off the charts," Yeltha exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. "The ship's energy levels, they're increasing. It's almost as if, it's waking up." Vornek's heart raced. A sense of dread settled over him. What had once seemed like an old, abandoned ship was now something much more ominous. But what could it be? The human warships were supposed to be weak, outdated. How could this one be so powerful? He turned to Yeltha. "Send a recon probe. I want to get a closer look. We need to know if there are any hidden weapons aboard." The crew quickly followed his orders. The probe shot off from Vornek's ship, heading straight for the human warship. The tension in the control room was thick as everyone watched the probe's progress on the screens. Vornek's mind raced with possibilities. What was this ship hiding? Seconds felt like hours as the probe neared the human warship. Vornek watched it carefully, his eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, the probe's signal was cut off. "Sir, the probe has been destroyed," Yeltha shouted, her face pale. The control room fell silent. Everyone turned to Vornak for direction. He stood frozen for a moment, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The probe was gone in an instant, vaporized by something. "Did it fire on the probe?" Vornak asked, his voice tight with tension. "Impossible. We didn't detect any weapons powering up this ship. It's not supposed to be able to do this," Yeltha replied, her voice shaking slightly. Vornek's eyes widened as he realized the full scope of the situation. The human ship had not only detected the probe, it had destroyed it without even showing any signs of resistance. What kind of technology did they have, and why had it been hidden for so long? A feeling of uncertainty washed over Vornak. He had always believed that the humans were no match for their advanced technology, but now, standing in front of this mysterious ship, he wasn't so sure. He had underestimated them. Commander Yeltha spoke again, her voice urgent. "I suggest we send a message to the fleet. This ship may be more dangerous than we realized." Vornak nodded slowly, his mind working through the possibilities. He had no choice now. He had to act quickly before this ship revealed more surprises. The question was no longer whether the ship posed a threat, it was how soon it would strike. "We will proceed with caution," Vornak said, his voice steady but filled with determination. But we will not make the same mistake twice. And with that, the alien fleet prepared to face the unknown, unaware of just how powerful the human warship truly was. The tension aboard the alien fleet was palpable as the warship drifted closer to the mysterious human vessel. Commander Vornak stood at the front of the control room, his eyes fixed on the ship's image on the viewing screen. The strange energy, readings from the human warship still pulsed in his mind. What he had thought was an easy reconnaissance mission had turned into something far more troubling. His second-in-command, Yeltha, paced beside him, her brow furrowed with concern. "Commander, I've never seen anything like it. The energy signatures don't make sense. This ship should be nothing but a relic, yet it's behaving as though it's alive. The energy spike, it's almost like it's calling to us." Vornak turned to her, his mind still reeling. "I've heard rumors of ancient human warships that were far more powerful than they seemed. This could be one of them. But how is it still operational?" Yeltha nodded slowly, her fingers brushing across the control panel as she adjusted the ship's sensors once again. The human vessel seemed almost dormant, but there was something ominous about Etan ancient power that had been hidden for far too long. It wasn't just any ship. This was a weapon, a relic of a forgotten war. "Commander, I suggest we proceed with extreme caution," Yeltha advised. "We can send out more probes, but I'm not sure it'll be enough. We need to understand what we're dealing with here." Vornak's eyes narrowed. The last thing he wanted was to make a rash move. The human warship had already shown it was capable of wiping out a reconnaissance probe in an instant, but there was something inside him, something primal that told him to push forward. The galaxy was vast, and the humans had long been underestimated. This ship might hold the key to understanding them better. "Send a full scan, increase the power," Vornak ordered, "but don't get too close. I want every piece of data we can gather." Yeltha hesitated but quickly complied. The scan was activated, and the screens began flashing with information. The alien fleet's technology was among the most advanced in the galaxy, but even they were having trouble deciphering the strange energy pulses coming from the human warship. The closer they scanned, the more powerful the readings became. It was as though the ship was drawing energy from somewhere, some unknown source. "Commander, I don't understand. The energy readings are growing stronger. They're unlike anything we've ever encountered. And we're not even close to the core yet," Yeltha said, her voice shaky. Vornak clenched his fists, the unease growing inside him. The human warship, long believed to be a simple relic, was something far more dangerous than they had imagined. It had to be ancient, its technology older than most of the fleet's knowledge, but somehow, it was still alive, still capable of something the aliens could not yet comprehend. "Increase the scan range," Vornak barked, "and prepare for any response. If this ship reacts to us in any way, I want to know how." The crew moved swiftly, tapping into their advanced technology to get a clearer view. But with each passing second, the alien fleet's uncertainty grew. It was as though they were standing at the threshold of something far greater than they had ever faced. The human ship wasn't just holding its ground, it's thriving. How was it still functional after so many years of silence? The minutes seemed to drag on, and Vornak's patience thinned. The uneasy feeling in his stomach grew stronger with each pulse of energy. There had to be something more to this ship, something hidden beneath its battered surface. If they didn't act quickly, they would be caught in the web of its ancient power. "Commander, the scan shows something strange," Yeltha said, her eyes wide with disbelief. "The human warship's turret's been powered by something we've never seen, some sort of quantum energy source, and it's growing exponentially. I think it's reacting to our presence." Vornak's mind raced. They were too close. The ship had awakened, and they had been its first target in centuries. It wasn't just energy they were dealing with. This was a weapon that had been dormant for so long and was now coming to life. "We need to pull back now," Vornak ordered, his voice urgent. The last thing he wanted was to underestimate the ship again, but even as the words left his mouth, it was already too late. Without warning, the human warship's weapons systems powered up. A low hum filled the air, followed by a flash of bright, searing light. The alien fleet's sensors went haywire as the warship's energy blasts shot out, striking the space around them with terrifying precision. "Commander, it's firing," Yeltha shouted, her hands flying over the control panel, trying to reroute the fleet's defenses. Vornak's heart raced as he watched the energy blasts rip through the empty space. His mind screamed at him to act fast, but the ship's power was overwhelming. The blasts weren't just random, they were targeting the alien fleet. His fleet, the realization hit him like a shockwave. They had underestimated the human warship. Get the shields up. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Vornak ordered, his voice steely with authority. Despite the fear that gripped him, the alien fleet scrambled to respond, but the human warship's energy blasts were too quick. They were swarming them, as if the warship had been waiting for this moment. And with every shot, the aliens realized just how wrong they had been to dismiss the human threat. But it wasn't just the power of the warship that unsettled Vornak. It was the fact that it was clear the humans had never stopped being a threat. They had simply been lying in wait, and now the time had come for them to strike back. Vornak gripped the edge of the command table, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to get his fleet out of this mess. The human warship wasn't just a relic, it was a weapon of unimaginable power, and now, he could only hope they hadn't provoked something far worse than they could handle. The tension aboard the alien fleet had never been higher. Commander Vornak stood at the front of the command deck, staring at the swirling chaos outside. His ships were scattered in an attempt to dodge the deadly blasts coming from the human warship. The once dormant ship had come alive in a way that Vornak could never have predicted. What was once thought to be a lost relic was now a formidable force, more dangerous than anything they had faced before. His mind raced with questions. How could this ancient ship possess such power? Why hadn't the humans used it earlier? He had heard the stories of humans being underestimated, but this was something else entirely. They had awoken a sleeping giant, and now it was clear that the human warship would not stop until it had destroyed them. Commander, they're continuing their fire, Yeltha said, her voice tense. We've activated all shields, but it's not enough. Their firepower is tearing through the defenses. Vornak clenched his fists. He could feel the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about power, it was about survival. The human warship's energy blasts were precise, striking the weak points in the fleet's shields and damaging the ships one by one. It was unlike any weapon the aliens had ever seen. For the first time in his career, Vornak found himself on the defensive. The ship that had once seemed like an easy target had now become a nightmare. Reroute all power to the front shields. I want every ship to focus on evasive maneuvers. Vornak barked, his voice filled with authority. He had to think fast. There was no time to waste. The longer they stayed in range of the human warship, the more damage they would take. But the human ship wasn't giving them any chance to escape. Commander, we've got incoming. One of his officers shouted from the back of the room. They've fired again, this time at our command ship. Vornak's heart skipped a beat. The command ship was the heart of the fleet. If it was destroyed, their entire operation would collapse. He turned quickly, his mind racing. He knew they couldn't outrun the human warship, but they might be able to outsmart it. The aliens had advanced technology, but it was clear that they had underestimated the humans' capabilities. Activate countermeasures, Vornak ordered. Fire a warning shot and then pull back. We need to make them think we're retreating. The officers scrambled to follow his command, but the alien fleet's movements were slow, disorganized. The human warship's sensors had already locked onto them, and there was no way to shake it off. The energy blasts continued to rain down on them, leaving deep scars in the hulls of the alien ships. We need more time, Commander, Yeltha urged. The humans, they know exactly where we're going. They're tracking our every move. Vornak gritted his teeth. The human warship's precision was unmatched. It was as if they were being led into a trap. But Vornak wasn't about to give up. His mind spun, with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. He had no choice but to think outside the box. The situation was dire, but he wasn't ready to face defeat. Prepare for a decoy maneuver. I'll take the fleet into the asteroid belt, Vornak said, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. Activate all cloaking technology. We need to make ourselves invisible. Yeltha looked at him with surprise. Commander, the human ship's technology might be able to pierce through our cloaks. It's too risky. Vornak didn't hesitate. We don't have a choice. If we stay in open space, we'll be sitting targets. We need to buy time and regroup. Now, prepare the cloaking devices. The crew worked quickly, and the alien fleet began its dangerous journey into the asteroid belt. The space around them was littered with massive rocks and debris, perfect for hiding in plain sight. But the fleet wasn't just trying to hide. They were moving deeper into the asteroid field, hoping to confuse the human warship. As the fleet navigated through the debris, Vornak's mind never stopped calculating. Could the cloaking devices hide them long enough to escape? The human ship's energy readings were still growing stronger, and it was only a matter of time before it found them. He had to act quickly, but it seemed like every move was met with failure. The human warship was relentless. Commander, we've been spotted, Yeltha said. her voice sharp with alarm. They're locking on again. It's like they know where we are. Vornik's stomach churned. How was this possible? The human warship should not have been able to track them through the dense asteroid field. The cloaking technology was state-of-the-art, one of the best the alien fleet had ever developed. Yet, the humans were staying one step ahead. Activate all remaining countermeasures, Vornak ordered. We cannot let them get a lock on us again. Break formation and scatter. The fleet responded immediately, breaking off into smaller groups, darting in different directions, but the human warship remained on their tail. It was as though the humans could sense every move they made. The energy blasts continued to rain down, cutting through the rocks around them, sending debris flying in all directions. Vornik's mind was spinning. Every maneuver he made seemed to be anticipated by the human warship. It was as if the humans had anticipated their every move. He had no doubt that they had faced similar situations in the past. But this level of coordination was unlike anything Vornak had seen before. He turned to Yotha, his eyes hard with determination. I need a solution. Now we're running out of time. Yotha worked furiously at the console, her fingers dancing across the controls. There's one option left, she said, her voice tight. We can send a direct electromagnetic pulse to disrupt their weapons systems, but it's risky. It could fry our own systems if we're not careful. Vornak weighed the options. They were cornered, and every second that passed brought them closer to destruction. Do it, he ordered. We don't have a choice. The crew quickly prepared the pulse, and the tension in the room mounted as Vornak watched the countdown tick away. The human warship was closing in on them, its energy readings growing by the second. It was now or never. The pulse shot out, and for a moment, everything went dark. The moment the electromagnetic pulse was released, silence filled the control room of the alien fleet's command ship. For one fleeting second, Vornak thought they had succeeded. The hum of their engines ceased, and the flashing lights on the monitors stopped blinking. But then, as quickly as it had come, the silence shattered. The ship jolted forward as though struck by an invisible force. The power returned, but there was something different about it. Commander, Yotha shouted, her voice laced with panic. The pulse. It's not having the effect we expected. Their weapons systems are still fully functional. Vornik's heart sank. The pulse had been their last hope, and now it seemed that nothing they had was going to work. How could the human warship still be operating at full capacity? Their technology was advanced, but this was something else entirely. The alien fleet's shields were weakening, and the human ship, despite the field of asteroids, was locking onto their position with terrifying accuracy. The humans had anticipated their move. It was becoming clear they had underestimated the human race in the worst possible way. The human warship was not just technologically advanced, it was something more. Vornak gritted his teeth, anger and frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. There had to be something he could do. All ships, break formation, Vornak barked, his voice cold and commanding. We're not going to outrun them. We'll have to outsmart them. His officers scrambled to respond. The fleet began to scatter again, but Vornak could see it in their eyes. The human warship was hunting them, closing in with every passing moment. They were no longer in control. The humans, with their old and seemingly forgotten warship, had turned the tables. The alien fleet was on the defensive, their every move anticipated by a force they could neither comprehend nor overpower. Vornak turned away from the viewing screen, his mind racing for a solution. Every scenario he considered led to the same conclusion. Their efforts to escape were futile. But there was still one thing they had not tried. Yotha, Vornik said quietly, his voice steady despite the rising panic inside him. Initiate a direct link with the human ship. I want to speak to them. Yotha stared at him in disbelief. Commander, you want to communicate with them? They've been trying to destroy us since we made contact. I don't care. Vornak snapped, cutting her off. We're out of options. If we're going to survive, we need to understand them, not just fight them. We need to know who or what we're up against. Yotha hesitated for a moment before reluctantly following his orders. The comms were activated, and soon a static-filled transmission came through. The connection was unstable, but there was a faint, almost eerie hum on the other end. Human warship, Vornak said, trying to sound confident. This is Commander of the Zorathian fleet. We wish to negotiate a ceasefire. You have shown your power. We acknowledge your strength, but we do not wish to continue this conflict. There was a long pause on the other end. Vornak could feel his palms sweating, his heart hammering in his chest. The silence was deafening. Had the humans heard him? Were they even listening? And then, finally, a voice crackled through the transmission. Why did you come here? The voice was calm, almost detached, as though the human was speaking to an insignificant creature. Why did you disturb our silence after all these years? The words hit Vornak like a physical blow. Silence. They hadn't disturbed it, they had just stumbled into it. The human warship had been waiting. It had been dormant, hidden, waiting, for the moment when it would be found. But by who? And why hadn't they used it before? What were they waiting for? We didn't know, Vornak said slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. We didn't know this ship was capable of this kind of power. We thought you were extinct. We thought your technology was nothing more than a relic of an ancient war. Another long silence followed, and for a moment Vornak wondered if the human had cut off the transmission. But then, the voice came again. You thought we were weak. You thought we had no power left. But you were wrong. The war ended long ago. But we never forgot. We were always watching. And now, you have awakened us. Vornak's mind reeled. The humans had been watching them all along. They had been waiting, but for what? What was their goal? Why had they stayed hidden for so long? We made a mistake, Vornak said, the words heavy on his tongue. We underestimated you. We thought we could handle you. But we were wrong. Please, let us go. We won't pursue you. We will leave your space in peace. For the first time, the voice on the other end seemed to hesitate. There was a brief pause, and then the human spoke again. You think this is about you, but it is not. It is about something far greater than you can imagine. Your mistake was not just in underestimating us, it was in believing you could control the galaxy without consequences. Vornak felt a chill run down his spine. The human was right. They had always believed they were the masters of the galaxy, but now, they were facing something they couldn't control, something ancient, something powerful. Then what do you want? From us? Vornak asked, his voice barely a whisper. The human's reply was calm, almost final. We want you to remember. We want you to understand that you are not the rulers of this galaxy. You are not the only ones with power. You have awakened us, and now, you will see what happens when humanity is forced to fight. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the fleet in stunned silence. Vornak stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process the words. The human warship was not just a threat, it was a message. And the message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were not to be underestimated. The fleet was now caught in a fight they had never anticipated, against an enemy they didn't understand. But one thing was certain, this war had only just begun, and the humans were ready to finish it. The silence that followed the human transmission hung in the air like a thick fog, pressing down on Commander Vornak and his crew. The alien fleet, once confident in their superiority, now felt like mere intruders in a world that had been asleep. For too long, the words from the human voice echoed in Vornak's mind. You have awakened us, and now you will see what happens when humanity is forced to fight. It was a chilling message, one that sent a ripple of unease through the command room. The crew, usually composed and unwavering, now exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't just a war for survival anymore. It was a war for dominance, for control of a galaxy they thought was theirs to rule. They had made a grave mistake by underestimating the humans. Commander, what should we do now? Yeltha's voice broke through the tense silence, her face pale as she stood before Vornak. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the console. Vornak didn't answer immediately. His mind was working furiously, trying to piece together the fragments of information they had gathered. The human warship wasn't just some forgotten relic. It was alive. It was ancient, and it had been lying in wait for the right moment to strike back. He glanced at the view screen. The human warship still loomed in the distance, its silhouette dark against the backdrop of stars. The once powerful alien fleet, now reduced to a shell of its former self, was scattered and vulnerable. There was no escaping the human ship, not now, not when it had already proven its ability to track them with precision. Every move they made, the human warship seemed to predict. They were being hunted, and the hunters were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. We need to get a better understanding of the human ship, Vornak said finally, his voice low and calm despite the rising tension in his chest. Their technology is unlike anything we've encountered. We need to know more about how they're able to track us, how they're able to remain so powerful after all this time. Yeltha nodded, and the crew quickly began running diagnostics, trying to break through the dense layers of data they had received. The more they tried, the more they realized how little they understood about the human ship's capabilities. It wasn't just the weapons, or the ability to track them, it was the fact that the warship itself seemed to possess a mind of its own. It was as if it was more than a machine, it was a force of nature, something with its own consciousness, its own will. Minutes passed, each one stretching out like an eternity. The human warship had not made another move, but Vornak knew it was only a matter of time before it did. They were waiting for the perfect moment to strike again, and when they did, there would be no more room for mistakes. "Commander," Yeltha called out again, her voice tinged with frustration. "The scans are useless. We've tried everything. It's like their systems are beyond our understanding. I don't know how they're doing it." Vornik's mind raced. The answer was somewhere hidden in the depths of the ship's history, in the stories of ancient human battles, in the lost technologies of a long-forgotten war. But where? How could they access that knowledge in time to save themselves? And then, it hit him. "The archives," Vornak said, his eyes narrowing. "We have to get to the archives. There must be something there that can explain this. This ship, this power, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. We need to learn from the past." Yeltha's expression shifted from one of confusion to realization. "The human archives," she muttered under her breath. "Of course, they were never just a war fleet, they were a part of something larger. Something we don't fully understand." Vornak turned and walked briskly toward the main communications panel. "Send a message to the fleet," he ordered. "All ships, prepare for a full dive into the human archives. We need to know everything about their history, their technology. This war is no longer just about survival, it's about understanding the enemy." As the crew scrambled to comply, Vornak couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something far more dangerous than they realized. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to reclaim what had been taken from them. The power they had hidden away, the technology they had kept secret, was now coming to light, and the galaxy was about to learn the price of underestimating humanity. The fleet slowly began to shift, moving toward the coordinates they had set for the human archives. Vornak's eyes remained fixed on the viewscreen where the human warship was still waiting. The calm before the storm, it was as though the ship was biding its time, allowing the alien fleet to make its move. Minutes later, they arrived at their destination. A large ancient structure appeared on their scanners, hidden deep within the debris of a once thriving human colony. It was a place long forgotten, its importance lost to the passage of time, but now, it held the key to their survival. If they could unlock its secrets, they might stand a chance against the human warship. "Commander," Yeltha said, breaking the silence. "We've arrived. What's the next step?" Vornak hesitated. The archives were the only thing left that might give them an edge, but he knew there was a risk. The human warship had already shown that it could anticipate their every move. The moment they accessed the archives, the humans would know, but there was no turning back now. They had already awakened something they couldn't control. It was time to face it head-on. "Access the archives," Vornak said, "and prepare for anything." As the crew began accessing the ancient databanks, Vornak felt a sense of dread wash over him. The knowledge they were about to uncover might change everything, but would it be enough to stop the human warship? Or had they already crossed a line from which there was no return? The truth was out there, hidden in the past, and whether they were ready or not, they were about to uncover it. The moment Vornak's fleet docked at the ancient human archives, a heavy silence fell over the command deck. The knowledge they had so desperately sought was now within their reach, but a sense of dread gnawed at the edges of Vornak's mind. They had hoped the archives would provide them with answers, strategies, weaknesses, insights, but what if the secrets they uncovered only deepened the mystery, or worse, made their situation even more perilous? The crew moved quickly, activating the dormant systems that had lain untouched for centuries. The lights flickered on, casting a dim, eerie glow across the databanks that hummed to life. The technology inside the archives was old, but still functional, its interface alien yet familiar enough for the crew to navigate. Yeltha, her hands steady despite the tension, began accessing the files, pulling up data that had been locked away for far too long. "Commander," Yeltha's voice cut through the quiet, her tone tinged with surprise. This is not what I expected. Archives don't just contain historical data, they hold something far more significant." Vornak stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he peered at the screen. What could be so important? He had assumed the archives would hold nothing more than records of human history, ancient battles, and forgotten technology. But this was different, explained Vornak, commanded, his voice calm but his mind racing. Yeltha hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There are records here of human experimentation experiments designed to enhance the capabilities of their soldiers, their war machines. It's not just about technology, it's about human biology. The archives contain records of genetic engineering, enhancements, and even the creation of super soldiers." Vornak felt a chill run down his spine. He had known the humans were resourceful, but this was something altogether different. If what Yeltha was saying was true, then the humans hadn't just been fighting with their weapons. They had been modifying themselves, pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be human, creating a new breed of warriors capable of unimaginable feats. Is this what they meant? Vornak muttered under his breath, thinking back to the words, "From the human warship, we were always watching, and now, you have awakened us." Had the humans not only been lying in wait, but preparing for something much larger? Were they capable of more than just an ancient ship with powerful weapons? Yeltha looked up from the screen, her face pale. There's more. According to these files, the humans didn't just stop at genetic enhancements. They developed a way to merge human consciousness with their war machines, creating hybrid soldiers who could control the ships with their minds. The warship, it could be controlled by a human consciousness, a single mind, linked to the ship's systems, making it almost impossible to track or predict Vornak's mind reeled. The implications were staggering. The human warship wasn't just a ship, it was a living, breathing entity, controlled by a human mind. No wonder they had been so difficult to predict. The ship was alive, not just with power, but with intention, and that intention had been waiting, growing, and now it was focused entirely on them. "We've been hunting shadows," Vornak said quietly, his voice low with realization. "The human warship, it's not just a weapon, it's an extension of the humans themselves. It thinks, it adapts, it learns." Yeltha nodded grimly. "And it has been waiting for us. All this time, the humans have been hiding, biding their time, waiting for the moment when they would be forced to fight back. They have adapted to every weapon, every strategy we've thrown at them, because they are part of the very thing we've been fighting against." Vornak's eyes hardened as he realized the full extent of their mistake. They hadn't just woken up a warship. They had awakened a new kind of warfare, one where the lines between human and machine were blurred beyond recognition. The human race had transcended the boundaries of conventional battle tactics. They had created something they could no longer control, and that something was now focused on wiping out the alien fleet. "How do we stop it?" Vornak asked, his voice tense. With urgency, Yeltha hesitated. "I don't know. The hybrid soldiers were designed to operate independently, but with the warship, there's a collective intelligence. The ship and its crew think as one. The only way to stop it might be to sever that connection, to destroy the human consciousness controlling the ship." Vornak clenched his fists. It wasn't just a war now, it was a race against time. They had to find a way to break the link between the human mind and the warship before the ship could destroy them all. But how? The human warship's power and intelligence were growing with every passing second. It was almost as though it could sense their every move, as if it had learned to predict them. The deeper they delved into the archives, the more Vornak realized how deeply they were entangled in something they could not control. "We need to get to the heart of the ship," Vornak said, his voice suddenly filled with resolve. "If we can sever the connection between the hybrid soldier and the warship, we might have a chance. But we can't wait any longer. They're coming for us." Yeltha nodded, her face set in determination. "I'll get the fleet ready. We'll have to move fast. We need to disable their tracking systems and get close enough to board the warship." Vornak turned to his officers, his expression hard. "Prepare for a direct assault. We move on the warship now. No more hesitation. We fight to win." The crew scrambled to follow his orders, their movements swift and precise. There was no more room for mistakes. The human warship was closing in, and with every moment, it was becoming more powerful, more connected, more unpredictable. Vornak knew this was their last chance. If they failed, it would be the end of their fleet, and possibly the end of their entire civilization. As the alien fleet prepared to launch its final assault, Vornak stared at the view screen, watching the human warship grow larger. This wasn't just a battle for control of the galaxy anymore. It was a battle for survival, and the stakes had never been higher. The alien fleet approached the human warship with careful precision, every ship in formation, prepared for a final assault. Commander Vornak's heart pounded as his fingers gripped the edge of his command chair, the weight of the moment settling. Over him, this was it, the culmination of everything they had fought for. The hybrid human warship, now fully aware of their presence, was no longer just an enemy ship. It was a living, breathing entity, with its mind locked in control, and, with every second that passed, it grew stronger, more connected to its power. But this time, Vornak was not going to underestimate it. He had learned the truth about the warship's mind, its ability to predict their every move, and its terrifying connection to the humans' genetic enhancements. They were no longer fighting a ship. They were fighting a consciousness that had been dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken, and that moment had arrived. The fleet moved closer, the human warship looming large on the viewscreen, its sleek, dark exterior like an ominous shadow against the stars. Vornik's ships were ready. They had studied the archives, devised a plan, and now they had to execute it with flawless precision. They couldn't afford any mistakes. "Commander," Yeltha's voice came through, steady but filled with concern. "The warship is locking onto our fleet again. They've initiated defensive measures. It's only a matter of time before they unleash everything they have." Vornak turned to face the screen, his eyes narrowing. He could feel the weight of the human presence, a silent pressure building, as if the warship itself was watching them, waiting for their next move. The energy from the ship pulsed, and Vornak knew they had already engaged in a battle of wills. The human ship was anticipating them, learning their strategies faster than they could implement them. "They know we're coming," Vornak said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've been waiting for this moment." Yeltha nodded, her hands gripping the controls with determination. "We've already seen their power. We've seen how they can adapt, how they can track our movements. The question is, how do we get close enough to stop it?" Vornak didn't have an answer, but he had one last plan, one that he hoped would work. The key to defeating the warship was not in brute force or advanced weaponry. It was in understanding the human connection to the ship. The warship was more than just a machine. It was alive, part of the human's design. If they could sever the connection between the ship and the human mind controlling it, they might have a chance to bring the warship down. "We have to board it," Vornak said, his voice firm. "Get close enough to disable the hybrid's control. It's the only way. We'll take them by surprise." Yeltha's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. "Understood. We'll begin the assault on their command deck immediately." The alien fleet split into smaller groups, each vessel moving with a sense of urgency. The plan was clear: distract the warship long enough to create an opening for their boarding teams. The fleet would move in as if they were retreating, only to come in for the kill at the last moment. But as they moved closer, it was becoming painfully clear that the human warship was already one step ahead. "Commander," Yeltha's voice came through again, a sense of alarm in her tone. "They're there. They're adapting. Their defensive systems are already compensating for our maneuver. The hybrid's intelligence is evolving faster than we can respond." Vornik's breath caught in his throat. The warship's adaptive response was beyond anything they had imagined. It was as if the ship itself had become a living organism, reacting to every move, every strategy, with perfect precision. "We need to move faster," Vornak urged, his pulse racing. "They're learning too quickly. We can't wait for the perfect moment. If we do, it'll be too late." The alien fleet surged forward, a wave of ships charging toward the warship with all their might. Energy blasts fired from the human ship, tearing through the void and striking the alien ships with deadly accuracy. The shields held for a moment, but Vornak could feel the strain, the pressure mounting. This was not going to be a battle of strength alone. It was going to be a test of their willpower, their ability to outmaneuver a force that seemed to know them better than they knew themselves. "Boarding teams are ready," Yeltha reported. "We're initiating the final assault." Vornak gave a brief nod, his eyes focused on the warship. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared to lead the fleet into what could very well be their final stand. The plan was simple: disable the hybrid's connection, seize control of the ship, and take out the heart of the human war machine. But the closer they got, the more Vornak felt the weight of the unknown pressing in on him. Was this truly the end of the conflict, or was it just the beginning of something much worse? The alien ships shot forward, narrowly avoiding energy blasts. As they surged toward the human warship's heart, the closer they got, the more intense the opposition became. The warship's systems were almost alive with movement, its defensive fire becoming more precise, more deadly with every second. "Hold steady," Vornak shouted, trying to steady his nerves. His ships veered and twisted, dodging blasts that